One of the last things the last Neanderthals ever made was a pattern scratched into a cave floor in Gibraltar that looks, of all things, like a hashtag. A crosshatch of deep grooves, cut by dragging a stone point through the same lines again and again, hundreds of strokes in all. It means nothing anyone alive can read. It is also proof that the hand which made it was busy with something other than staying alive. This is the southern edge of what is now Spain, around 40,000 years ago. There is no named last Neanderthal. Nobody knows which one it was, or which morning was the final one, or whether the end came in a single winter or ground on for centuries. The last Neanderthal is a device, a way to hold a slow disappearance still long enough to look at it. Almost everything in the day that follows was dug out of the ground and is real. He wakes at dawn, already cold, because the fire has burned low and the cold here has teeth. Short by our standards, maybe 5'4", and built like a door. Wide ribcage, dense heavy bones, more muscle packed on a shorter frame, the whole design shaped by a few 100,000 years of Ice Age Europe to hold heat and take punishment. The broad nose probably warmed and wetted the freezing air before it reached the lungs. His kind had lived on this continent longer than ours has existed anywhere on Earth. He wakes cold anyway. Everyone is always a little cold. The fire is the center of the world. They kept it, fed it, carried embers when they moved, and there is good evidence they could make it from nothing, striking mineral against flint for a spark. They used it in ways that edge into chemistry. To fix a stone point onto a wooden shaft, they cooked glue, heating birch bark until it wept tar. A job that takes fire, patience, and knowing exactly what you are after. People did that here tens of thousands of years before anyone laid a single brick. The tools come off the stone in his hands in minutes. The method is far older than he is, a way of trimming a flint down to a prepared core and then striking off a flake whose shape was decided before the blow ever landed. It takes planning 3 and 4 steps ahead, holding the finished edge in mind while working the rough rock toward it. The flakes come away sharp enough to shave with. He trims the edges, binds on a grip, and carries a kit that can cut, scrape, and butcher, resharpened over and over until it is a worn-down stub. Breakfast, if there is any, is last night's kill. The old picture of the Neanderthal as pure meat eater turns out to be half the story. Their teeth still hold the residue of cooked roots and grass seeds, and traces of chamomile and yarrow, plants with almost no food value, which some researchers read as medicine. They cracked the long bones for the marrow and scraped off the fat, because in that cold fat was survival, not indulgence. On this coast, they ate the sea too. Mussels prized off the rocks, pigeons taken off the cliffs at night, monk seals, dolphins stranded on the sand. They roasted tortoises in the shell. Some of the very last of them were beachcombers. The real food, the food that built those bodies, had to be walked up to and stabbed. Chemical signatures locked into their bones put them level with the wolves and the cave hyenas, right at the top of the food chain. They hunted horse and deer and bison, sometimes larger, and they did it with no bows and no throwing spears, only a wooden spear you had to shove into something bigger than you, at arm's length, while it tried to kill you back. They knew the ground, the narrow places where a horse could be cornered, the soft bogs where something heavy would slow. We know how the killing went, because we have the skeletons. The pattern of healed breaks on Neanderthal bones, clustered on the head, neck, and arms, matches one modern group more closely than any other in the medical record. Rodeo riders, people thrown by large, furious animals for a living, which tells you 2 more things. They survived it, often. A healed fracture means the injured hunter was not left in the snow. Someone hauled him home and fed him while he was useless. There is a man from Shanidar, in the mountains of Iraq, who lived for years with one arm withered and gone below the elbow, likely blind on one side from a crushing blow to the face, deaf and limping on damaged legs. Half-wrecked and kept alive into what passed for old age, which was maybe 45. The old man of La Chapelle in France had lost most of his teeth and was bent double with arthritis, and his people fed him toothless. And when he died, they laid him in the ground. Whether they buried their dead on purpose is still argued, But the argument now is how often and how carefully, not whether it ever happened. Bodies were set in pits, curled on their sides, tucked out of reach of scavengers. Some of them were children. One small body lowered into a French rock shelter with the ground scooped out to fit it. At Shanidar, someone found clumps of ancient pollen around a skeleton and called it a flower burial, a body laid on a bed of blossoms. That reading is disputed. The pollen may have been dragged in by burrowing rodents. And recent digging in that same cave uncovered another body, arranged in a channel in the rock, which has reopened the argument rather than closing it. Take the flowers away, and this much still stands. They did not always leave their dead where they dropped. The band he lives in is small, 10 or 15 people, all of them kin of some kind. Most Neanderthals died young. Their teeth carried childhoods broken by hunger, bands of arrested growth laid down like rings through the winters they barely cleared. Few saw 40. A group this size could raise only so many children and bury only so many. Before there was no group left at all, populations forever. One hard winter from zero. By dusk, the hunters are back, or they are not, and either way the fire has to be fed. They decorated themselves, which almost nobody believed they could until the finds piled up. Across Europe, the same thing keeps surfacing. Eagle talons with cut marks and a polish worn where a cord would rub, claws strung into ornaments long before a single modern human set foot on the continent. They gathered dark raptor feathers. They ground red and yellow ochre and black manganese into powder. In caves in Spain, there are pierced, painted shells and hand stencils and red marks on the walls that one dating method puts at 64,000 years old, 20,000 years before our species arrived to take the credit. There is stranger evidence still. Long before this man, in a cave in France, Neanderthals walked a fifth of a mile into total darkness and built rings out of broken stalagmites, snapped to length and stacked by firelight, for reasons no one can name. That was 176,000 years ago, deep underground, where nothing lives and nothing grows, and the only light is the light you carry in. Behind the heavy brow sat a brain as large as yours, in some skulls larger. Whether it worked like yours, we cannot fully know, but the clues point one way. A throat bone from a Neanderthal at Kabara is shaped almost exactly like ours, the anatomy that speech runs on. The scratches on their front teeth, left by food gripped in the mouth and cut with a blade pulled tight in one hand, run mostly the same direction, which means most of them were right-handed, which means brains split into sides the way ours are, the split that in us carries language. The safe bet is that they talked. We simply have no idea what any of it sounded like. Then the others came. Modern humans, taller, lighter, moving in bigger and better connected groups. They carried spear throwers and bone needles with eyes, which meant clothing cut and sewn to fit instead of hides just lashed on. In a Europe that kept jerking colder, a closed seam is not a small advantage. Their trade moved shells and stone across distances no Neanderthal band seems to have matched. For thousands of years, the two kinds of humans shared one continent. They met. We are certain they met because of what they left inside one another. Most people alive outside Africa today carry something close to 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. It sits in the genes for skin and hair, for immune defense, for how fast the blood clots, for how some bodies handled a virus that shut the world down a few years ago. Add up the scraps spread across everyone, and roughly a fifth of the whole Neanderthal genome is still here, shuffled through billions of living people, no two carrying quite the same pieces. The last Neanderthals did not simply die out. A part of them was absorbed, folded into the newcomers one child at a time, until there was no one left to call Neanderthal. Why they lost has been fought over for a century, and anyone selling one clean answer is selling something. They were never many. The entire Neanderthal population of Europe at any one moment may have been only in the low tens of thousands, scattered in small bands that rarely met, breeding too close, each one small enough to vanish in a bad generation. In those last millennia, the climate lurched, warm to savage cold and back, faster than a slow-breeding people could follow. The newcomers may have simply taken the same deer and the same caves, or carried new diseases, or just raised more children who lived, most likely all of it at once, in different places, across centuries. Pick a favorite cause and the evidence will argue with you. Extinction is rarely one blow. Usually it is arithmetic. On the coast, the bands thinned and drifted apart. Fires that once answered each other across the valleys stopped answering. Some evidence puts the final holdouts down here in the far south, in caves facing the water, North Africa in sight on a clear day, and no way to reach it, because the southern tip stayed warm and the sea kept feeding them a while longer. Even that is argued now. There is no scene of the last death. No deathbed, no final words. Nobody left to bury the one who had buried the others. Just a thinning, band by band, cave by cave, until one winter, a fire on the Gibraltar coast burned down to coals, and this time no one woke to feed it.